Our next episode is called Sarek. It's episode number 71 of Star Trek The Next Generation, and it originally aired on May 19th, 1990. It was written by Peter Beagle, by a story by Mark Cushman and Jake Jacobs, and was directed by Les Landau. Now, Sarek, he's a highly esteemed Vulcan ambassador, and he's the father of Mr. Spock from the original Star Trek series. He boards with his wife and two staff members on a diplomatic mission on the Enterprise D. For over 90 years, Sarek has built a personal friendship with the Ligarans, and Picard will take him for a final meeting to negotiate their entrance into the Federation. As the Enterprise warps to the Ligaran homeworld, incidences of random violence erupt on the ship, and Dr. Crusher and Troy finally isolate the cause. They surmise that Sarek suffers from Bendii syndrome, which is a disease that afflicts some Vulcans over the age of 200, and it culminates in total loss of emotional control. And since Vulcans are partially telepathic, Crusher and Troy guess that Sarek is unconsciously projecting his intense emotions on the others. Now, with the conference with the Ligarans in jeopardy, Picard confronts Sarek, and during the exchange, as you can see in this picture here, it becomes obvious that Sarek has lost his emotional control, and Picard decides to call off the meeting. Now, upon the urgings of Sarek's wife, Picard suggests a mind meld, and Vulcans can telepathically link themselves to others. If you're familiar with the original series, you've seen that. And Picard believes he can bolster Sarek's emotional stability during the negotiations. So Sarek agrees and performs the procedure with Picard. And as Sarek talks with the Ligarans, his savage emotional outbursts rip through Picard as Beverly Crusher sits with him during this. Goes through a traumatic period. But it is enough to allow Sarek to complete one last diplomatic triumph before retiring. So Sarek and his wife thank Picard for doing this, and they're eternally grateful, and they leave the Enterprise, and that's the end of the episode. Now, what's interesting about this episode, actually there are a lot of things that are interesting, but this was originally an episode given by somebody from the outside, so not on the writing staff, and it was originally just about an ambassador who begins to have mental problems as he's being taken up on some mission. It was just as general as that. And as the writing staff started talking about it, they thought it would be really interesting if they took a powerful member of either Starfleet Command or the Federation and have them going through a time of their lives where they're beginning to have problems with aging. So that's the aging aspect was part of the writing staff's idea. And from that point, it was just a couple steps away where they thought about, well, how do we make this a science fiction show? Which led to, if it were a Vulcan, then you could have some telepathic impact in that and have some kind of a disease. And after they established that, they thought, well, what about Sarek? Now, I think there was some thought about, well, why don't we just have Spock do it? But at the time, for some reason, it wasn't clear that they felt like they couldn't use Mr. Spock on the show or Leonard Nimoy. I don't know if it was because I thought it would be too expensive to do so, but for some reason that was not under consideration. But they did feel like Sarek could be a possibility for that. And from there it takes off really well. I think Mark Leonard is a phenomenal actor, and he really does some of his best work as Sarek, I think, in this episode. Some even argue that it's better than Journey to Babel from the original series, because he really gets to express a lot here in this episode. There is a scene where there is a concert going on, and Data's playing the violin very beautifully, and all you can see is a tear fall from Sarek's eye, and it reaches to such a point within him that he can't take it and has to leave the theater of the Enterprise there, and Captain Picard and Troy especially notice that. And that's really well done to show that he's still trying as hard as he can to hold it together, but even with that, one little aspect of emotion is devastating, especially for a Vulcan. So that was a huge scene right there. The scene that you see in this picture where Picard, he's not looking forward to confronting Sarek about this because he has a lot of respect for this man, as we do as Star Trek fans, knowing him from the movies and from the TV show of the original series. So they did it very well where this man needed to be confronted, but he still tried as best he could to be respectful to Sarek. So I thought that was very well done. And then, of course, the scene of the mind meld, I think that is really well done as well. The director was having some trouble, Les Landau, of how to frame that together, but then the two actors talked to him about it and what ideas they had, and it worked very well, in my opinion. And then, of course, the final scene where Picard is dealing with the onslaught of all of Sarek's emotions. I think that is some of the best acting that Patrick Stewart has done on this series, just portraying that, and also Picard being rocked by all of these things. And as I watched the Blu-ray, they said they had to do numerous takes of that. And just to imagine Patrick Stewart having to go to that level of such emotional intensity after a long shoot and an exhausting day, that really says a lot about him and his acting ability. So hats off to him on that as well. This is an episode where there was a lot of personal stakes and personal drama, and that was really what Michael Piller wanted, especially for this season, to have episodes that did that, and this is done beautifully. Even if it didn't have the aspect of the original series, I think that would have been done well, but the fact that we finally bring in somebody from the original series, I think that adds to the specialness of this episode. And another important thing to point out is this is the first time that reference is made to one of the starring cast of the original series. Just one line of dialogue where Amanda and Spock are specifically mentioned. There was talk for a while that they couldn't even mention Spock's name in The Next Generation because they wanted to make it distinct between The Next Generation and the original series, and they didn't want to feel like that they were relying on the original series, as rightly so. It seemed like in the beginning of Star Trek The Next Generation they did a little bit. We saw the episode The Naked Now, which was basically an update of the original series The Naked Time. But by this point, the original, or The Next Generation, has finally been able to stand on its own 2 feet. And I think that allowed the producers to give writers permission to finally reference the original series. And I think because of that, it makes it all the more richer for this episode, because there's a continuity there. And we can see that this is all one big universe of Star Trek, and it's fun to see how that overlaps sometimes with this. Besides this episode with Sarek, we did see Dr. McCoy, as you recall, in the pilot of Encounter at Farpoint. And in the future, we'll see some other familiar faces from the original series be a part of The Next Generation as well. So thanks for watching this review, guys, and I'll talk to you next time for the 3rd season of Star Trek The Next Generation.